And we're back for Tuesday training for practitioners. This is exciting. Look how many beautiful people are in the room today. I love it when you guys come live so I get to talk with all of you. It's so gorgeous. Welcome, welcome to all of you here for Tuesday training. Woo, let's see who's here. Anna's here, Cheryl's here, Lori's here, Valerie's here. I know Asia came in, Gary's here also. Nafia, it's great to see you as well. I'm happy that you're here. Okay, we're up to some fun stuff today. Tuesday training for practitioners. I'm so glad that y'all are here. Thank you for making time to come live because I really love when we get to talk face to face, voice to voice. I have some fun stuff for us today. We're going to continue with our track so far that we've been following on muscles and movement. Well, that's a course actually. We've been talking about muscles here in Tuesday training. And it happens to coincide with muscles and movement, which our mastery practitioners are involved in right now, and our study group, which is delicious. On Tuesdays, we've been covering joint action and muscles, and then reciprocal inhibition muscles and joint actions. And today we're going to move on to when all of that is not going as planned and compensatory patterns come onto the scene. So it's kind of juicy. If you're joining us today for the first time, welcome. So glad that you're here. If you're watching on the replay for the first time, also welcome. So glad that you're here. Do let me know if you're here on the replay. Put a little emoji, a happy sign, a hand wave, something so that I know that you're here. And I'll just share, if you are here for the first time, you may want to go back to a week or two ago and pick up some of the conversation that we've already had on joint action and muscles. I know all of you who are here, who are on screen with me right now, can probably attest to that as we've been going forward, sometimes it's helpful to just backtrack one step and be like, where was I? Oh, right, this is what I need to know to then go forward. And that is really where I love to highlight for all of us practitioners, both movement and manual practitioners. If you're up to creating resolution for pain or compensatory patterns or functional patterns or functional pain, if you're here to resolve that, it really is valuable to have a strong foundation of anatomy, meaning the parts that are doing the function or the mechanics, know what those are, know how they work, understand them, then be able to identify when it's off, which is a separate step. And then the third step is, and now what do I do about it? So oftentimes when I'm talking to practitioners, and they want to know, thanks, Lori, for dropping that in. That's beautiful. Oftentimes when I'm talking to practitioners and they come to me with client questions, which I love, by the way, I love solving client issues for all of you and with all of you. Typically, it's the question that's on the table is 2 steps too soon, right? So it's like, I have this client and they're presenting with XYZ, and what do I do about it? Or I have this client and then they're presenting with, and I did A, B, and C, and then something else, and now what do I do about it? And Anna's laughing because we just had a conversation about this literally this weekend. It's super common. It's super common, and I'm here for it, by the way. Continue to ask those questions. And what I'm hoping to create for us in Tuesday training is for you to recognize, where do I get to rewind back to? Because I actually have the information. I'm just 2 steps ahead of myself in asking this question. But if I rewound a step or two, back to something I know about the body's design and how it works, I might have the answer. And then I don't have to, and then, and then we get to calm down and not panic and all the things. So again, I'm here to help. I'm absolutely here to serve you. I love talking client questions, and I want you to be able to do it on your own. So sometimes doing that on our own means, what do I know and what do I get to return back to? So again, if you're joining for the first time today, you may want to go back and watch some of the trainings from a week or two ago. We've been talking muscles actually for a minute. We've been talking muscles since, when did we start muscles? In September for Tuesday training? We started our talk in September around muscles, I think. Yeah. Is that right? Maybe August, I feel like or maybe we did joint action in August.
Joint action and muscles, they kind of go hand in hand. So I think it's been a minute.
It's been a minute, and you're right, Lori. They do go hand in hand, which is exactly the highlight and the recap of what I just said. We talked joint action first so that we could talk muscles. And when we're learning muscles, we get to refer back to joint action to understand what the muscles are up to. So they do definitely go hand in hand for sure. So here we are, and that's what we're up to. Let me just open the chat so I can see if you guys are also going to be chatting. It's much better for me, by the way, if you can use your microphone and come off mute. If you have a question, it's just easier for me to stay present in the conversation rather than stop and move over to words. It tends to, it feels disconnected for me. So I'd really prefer it if you can use your mic. And if you can't, absolutely use the chat. That's what it's there for. And if you're watching on the replay and you also have a question, please put it in the comments. When I'm not talking and presenting, I can read no problem. So if you want to leave questions or comments in the comment section, I can absolutely go back, and I do read all of them, and I will answer them for you. So the note that Lori put in the chat for us was for the Muscles and Movement course. So just a moment here, please allow me to indulge. Here we are on Tuesdays for Tuesday training. All practitioners are welcome to Tuesday training. Movement practitioners, manual practitioners, wannabe practitioners, people who've been at this game for a long time or who have just started. Everybody's welcome, for sure. And there's always something here for you, I believe, on Tuesdays. And we often talk about anything related to the work we do. Movement, muscles, client work, business, development, anything along the way of being a practitioner. That's what we do here on Tuesdays. It's kind of like a free-for-all. We happen to be on a particular track that we've been following week after week, because I left you guys with a cliffhanger a couple weeks ago, and then I just picked up from there, and I kind of like that. We also do Q&A here on Tuesdays, so at any time you can type a question in the chat, even if it's not on the topic we happen to be talking about that day. Always open to that, okay? So that's Tuesdays. Then we also have our academy, our Shots Method Academy. There's over 200 hours of training for practitioners, pre-recorded slides, downloads, quizzes to check your proficiencies, and an entire community that goes along with that. You can watch those at your own pace, at your own time. One of the courses that we have that I've already mentioned and that Lori put in the chat is called Muscles and Movement. It's probably one of the densest courses that we have actually in the whole academy. It's a 25-hour, Anna's like, yes, absolutely, no question. Okay, great. So yes, it's very dense. It's a 25-hour muscles and movement course. And the reason that I like this course is because it's the course that I would have wanted. So that might sound a little arrogant, but bear with me for a second. I learned muscles in school and the names of all of them and all of their attachment points, and was tested on all of them heavily. Great. And once I got into a clinical setting and started working as a practitioner, the names of those muscles and where they insert gave me about 20% value. So I do believe that we need to know the names of muscles just so that we can call them out. Like I tend to give a personality to all the muscles. So if I can call you out by name, then I can have a relationship with you, kind of thing. But knowing what they do in their function and what they don't do or aren't supposed to do, and being able to distinguish the difference between what they're supposed to do and when they're doing something they're not supposed to do, is the key for remedying issues clinically. And that's what we don't get the first time around when we learn muscles. So I just want to emphasize that. Sometimes in the title of a course, you might not know, like, well, I already know muscles, but I need something else. This one's a little different. We go into, I teach you a muscle, and then I teach you what does it do, and then you get tested on that. And then I teach you another muscle group, and then what do they do, and then you get tested on that. And so we've been doing a little bit like a high level overview like that here on Tuesdays for the last few weeks, for sure. And then you'll also hear me say, or have heard me say, our mastery program. And that's a third different track. And that is a year-long program. It's not a course, but it's a program. And it's the program where I train other practitioners, both movement and manual practitioners, to work the way I learned how to work clinically. And when I say learned how, meaning I made it up. So there were things that I learned in school that were great. And then I kept looking for something better and more. And so I developed the method, the SHOTS method that you've heard me say, and that is taught in a year-long program. It's not in the academy, but it is taught. And we're here for that. And we also have, like Lori has her name here listed as an anatomy advocate. We have an amazing community that really holds all of these places together. So our anatomy advocates meet every week, and we strategize on who we can serve and how we can serve them and what they're up to and what they get to have, they meaning practitioners. And we also have an alumni group of practitioners who've already graduated, who also come back, and we meet regularly. And then of course, all of you who aren't yet in our academy or maybe even in our mastery program, but still meet here. So our community is really amazing. So you can find us and connect with us in any way that feels right for you at the time, that, you know, in the time of day or time of year where you're at. And for today, we're going to move on to the conversation we've been having the last few weeks with muscles. We've covered joints, we've covered muscles, and the main guy that does the job, which is contraction, the guys who help him do that job. And when any of those don't do their job, what do? And now today we're going to layer another layer on with compensatory patterns. Compensatory patterns are a bit tricky because they can stack, meaning you can have a compensatory pattern that is the body's genius design to solve a problem, by the way, and get the job done, meaning get you to still walk across the floor or up the flight of stairs. Body will create compensation patterns around injuries. The body will create compensation patterns in order to allow things to heal. The body will create compensation patterns just because you've been kind of sloppy in neuroplasticity, and the way the body's learned how to do something is like not really efficient. So the body can create compensation patterns for lots of reasons, and it's genius because again, the body creates it so you can continue doing whatever you want to do. The problem really with compensatory patterns is that while they're genius, they're not efficient. And unless they are erased and rewritten, or rewound and rewritten, unless they're addressed, they're still there because of the neuroplasticity in the brain. Meaning the brain will remember a functional pattern in as little as 90 seconds. And if you repeat that 90-second pattern even twice, it's a pattern. It's locked in there. So if we think about compensatory patterns, like let's say you hurt your ankle and you're in an air boot, or you're on a crutch, or you're not rolling through completely in your gait until it heals, depending on the severity of the injury. As soon as you've altered how you walk on that ankle more than once for more than 90 seconds, you've created a pattern. The brain's going to remember, oh, this is what I do now at that location. Not how I was designed to do it, but what I am asked to do. And those are different. So again, just going back to what I said earlier, I really find so much value for us as practitioners in having clarity around our design. Because if we know how the body's designed and we return it to where that is, there's no pain there. But unless we know exactly how we're designed, how things are meant to move, then we can't really tell what's wrong when it goes wrong. We hear pain symptoms and we know what that means. Our clients tell us and they get flustered and we get flustered, but that doesn't solve the problem. That just means everybody's flustered. Solving the problem means returning the body back to its design. And within as little as 90 seconds, you can be off that design for genius reasons. So we want to know where that is and how to intercept it. The other thing about compensatory patterns that I said, meaning, let me get my tongue out on my roof of my mouth. The other thing that I said about compensatory patterns is that they stack, which means unless the pattern has been addressed and the body's function returned to its design, the next time the body is faced with something that it must create a genius solution to, that genius solution is also a compensatory pattern that stacks on another compensatory pattern that's already there. And now you're in a pickle. Now you're in a pickle with the body, and you're in a pickle as the practitioner trying to sort that out. And your client's probably super frustrated or fearful or whatever, whatever they present with, understandably, that comes with their pain. So we want to know about compensatory patterns. But rather than studying compensatory patterns, there is more value, my loves, in practicing and studying the body's design. I don't need to spend a whole lot of time on symptoms. I love symptoms. I love exploring them. And I learned this for myself, actually, right around the time when I was diving deep into trigger points. Does anybody here study trigger points? Anybody here study trigger points? Valerie a little, Cheryl a little. Yeah, it's a dense topic. I don't know what your reasons were for not doing more instead of just dabbling a little bit. But I know what mine were. And I have the utmost regard for Janet Travell, Dr. Travell, who wrote our trigger point myotherapy textbooks. There's 2 of them, tons of value, tons of admiration for what she knew and how she put that together. I learned a lot about muscles and their personalities by reading through her textbook. I also learned a lot about referral patterns, which helped me not squirrel, right? Because sometimes what we'll do as practitioners is the pain's here, I'm going to focus here. Don't do that. You're wasting your time. And I don't use the word don't very readily. And I learned that by my track in studying trigger point therapy. And here's why I stopped between textbook 1 and textbook 2. And again, tons of value and admiration. The reason I stopped is because I realized while I was chasing the trigger point train, what I was doing was chasing symptoms. And there will always be a trigger point if there's a compensatory pattern in the body, always. So what I wanted to do was just be super hella efficient and stop all the monkey business because I get a little impatient in life. I just want the answer. And so that's when I started developing the work of the shots method. Rather than focusing on the symptoms and the nature of the symptoms and the details of the symptoms and the complexity of the symptoms, amazing, curious, wow, fascinating how the body creates all that. All of that knowledge didn't solve the problem for me. It just entertained me a lot and like got me really interested in the body's design. And then I realized the body's design. Why are we over here in symptom land? Why aren't we over here in fixing it? Over there in fixing it is addressing symptoms. Over here in addressing it, returning the body back to the design means there will be no trigger points. So I wanted to go there. And that's the mind space behind the work that I do and why I question you guys when I question you, because I want you to not be so distracted in the intensity of some symptoms, especially when there's stacked compensatory patterns. Stacked compensatory patterns can be loaded with trigger points and inflammation and pain and referral pain and loss of sensation and tingling. Like compensatory patterns come with all the symptoms. Any symptom imaginable can be part of a compensatory pattern. You can get lost for days in the symptoms, for sure. That's not going to get us the answer. But going back to how it's designed, there's always a solution there. So it's not that I don't love symptom talk, but we get to have like 2 minutes of airtime on it and then get back to the solution, which is how the body's designed. Okay. So I want us to use that idea today as we're talking through compensatory patterns, not on the compensatory pattern itself or how it got there, although that's needed, but 2 minutes on that and 98 minutes on the other. 2% on symptoms, most of the percentage on restoring back to how it's designed. And if you can adopt that and return the body back to the way it's designed without telling yourself that the symptoms will impede you, then you'll make it really quick for you and them. Sometimes what I'll hear practitioners say, and you might have said this, I probably said it at one point too. Well, I know that I need to do such and such for the client, but their symptoms or their pain or their injury or their history, and as soon as we say but, we're out. Now we're in the symptoms have more power than the design of the body. So I want to be careful here that I'm not sounding too black and white. Yes, the symptoms are needed to know and what the body's been through, absolutely. But mostly for like a context and a starting point, not on a staying point. Don't fixate on the symptoms. If you're going to fixate on anything, fixate on the body's design and how to get it back there. Okay, and I'll just repeat one more time. We do want to know the body's design. We want to know and to be able to identify when things are going awry. And we want to know how to return it. Those are 3 separate steps. So just be honest with yourself about the step that you're in and where you get to go. Yeah, Lori, what's
Gina,
coming up?
yeah, so you're taking an intake for a client, then how much time do you spend on what they're sharing their symptoms with? If we're taking it back, like, we need to know that, but how much do we need to know?
You do need to know. Oh my gosh, we're going to do a class on intakes. We'll do another
Okay, so we'll
Tuesday thing on
table that. Okay.
So we'll table it. Well, I'll give you an answer, but where there's more to explore. And here's what I'll say. Oh, this is so good.
Right. Or with compensatory patterns, like intakes and that kind of thing.
I'm going to tell you two things, and then I'm going to stop because I could squirrel on this topic super easily. And I want to make sure I deliver what I promised you guys. Two things. First, everything your client tells you on an intake, if you set the stage for the intake, and if you set the stage correctly, and you are doing an intake that's valuable for you to create a solution, that there's a skill in that. If you're setting up the intake correctly, everything that they tell you, you need to know, because you're in touch with their subconscious, and their subconscious is telling you exactly what you need to know. What you do with what they tell you is clear, and that is, when they tell you what they tell you, your answer, your process with that information should come up with, what does that mean functionally? What does that mean about what the body's been through? What does that mean about how the body's designed and whether there's a compensatory pattern? What does that mean about where they're asking me to be returned to? So, and I'm throwing out just ideas here, but when they tell you what they tell you, if you set up the intake correctly, everything they tell you is meaningful. And what you do with it is, again, what do I do about it? Meaning, what does this mean functionally? And if it means this functionally, and I return them back to their design, we're good. So
got it. So if somebody says, I had a knee replacement, I go, okay, functionally, what is that doing to their body, and what are the possible okay, got it. Yeah.
I've had a knee replacement, and then I want to know, and then you say to yourself, okay, that means this bone has been affected, and these are the muscles that attach to that bone, and these are what those muscles do, and this is what that joint is needed for, gait, stairs, etc. Yes. What does it mean functionally? When they tell me something's going on in their body and they give me their history, what does that mean functionally? And if you can answer that while you're doing the intake, your treatment plan is literally being written for you. Because what they're telling you for a reason. So we get to make it really easy. Anyway, I could squirrel. I told myself I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it, but I can talk to you guys about intakes on another Tuesday training for sure. It's a so good question, Lori. Yeah, what we don't want to do is silence them and have them tell us nothing and then try to figure out in this treasure map where to start. That's super hard. Like, of course you need them to give you the starting point. Any treasure map that you've ever had has a "you are here." And and here's where the treasure map is, back to the functional design, and you get to find the path between where you are here and where the treasure chest is. You get to figure that out, absolutely. But you have a starting point. You have a "you are here," and that comes from the client. Awesome. What I want you all to not do when the client gives you all their history is go into that, oh God, I don't know what that means. Oh God, what the hell? Oh shit, that's a lot. Oh my gosh, I don't know if I know how to do. Don't do that, because then you're not even listening anymore. If you can hear your own inner dialogue, you are not listening to what they're saying. At best, you're hearing 50% of what they're saying. You're going to miss it. So that's what we've been practicing the last couple of weeks, to just stay with what you know. Stay with what you know. Let that serve you. Remain calm, and then carry forward from there. Okay, super great questions. Okay, so how's that sound? You guys ready? You feel sufficiently supported and ready to start? Okay, so let's walk through. Here's Murph. For those of you who know Murph, this is his favorite time of year because he feels like he's not naked, because everybody looks like this time of year. And thank you, Lori, for allowing us to use your image in our student lounge for our happy skeleton we saw on our walk one day. It was lovely. Okay, so we've been working with hyperextension of the hip, as our joint action, right? So here's Murph standing and here he is in hyperextension of the hip. And I'm going to use that again today. I like it as a through line through, especially if you're going to rewind and go back and watch some classes previously. Then you'll be able to pick up and be like, oh yeah, and then. Oh, good, Gary, so profound. I think you were talking about the intake process, so that's great. And Gary, I love when we have conversations because your conversations are always profound. You always ask deep probing questions, and then more, Gina, and then more, and then what about this? So thanks for being here, and I'm happy that you found value. Okay, so here we are in hyperextension of the hip, and what did we already identify is the prime mover of hyperextension of the hip? Who here will share with us?
Glute max.
Say it again, Valerie.
Glute max.
Yeah, glute max, exactly. And what is the main muscle on the opposite side of the lever, also known as the antagonist, the one that's lengthening?
Psoas.
Psoas, yeah, exactly. Perfect. And then we started adding on synergist muscles, meaning the helper bees, the guys that help out. So what is the synergist for hyperextension of the hip?
Hamstring group.
Yeah. And what is the, so this is me embellishing, just FYI, in reciprocal inhibition, which is, who can describe reciprocal inhibition? I feel like I'm doing a lot of the talking right now. Who can describe reciprocal inhibition? What is it?
You got me on that one.
Okay, so
I need your definition on that.
that's okay.
Is it
That's
helper bees, or are those the synergists?
so reciprocal. The question on the table is, what's
Yeah.
reciprocal inhibition?
I thought it was the chorus, not the chorus, the backup singers. But then I also think it's part of the lever system. So
Yeah, reciprocal inhibition absolutely includes the lever system. I remember Gina saying that the lever system is a tree of reciprocal inhibition. And it's the whole movement pattern in that joint, which obviously is made up of the lever system, but also, as you were saying, Lori, the muscles that then come in to support and help that main antagonist doing the action.
Awesome. Okay, this is great. So you guys have it, and it's perfect to recap it right here. We just talked about hyperextension of the hip is a joint action. So again, back to where we started in August, the joint actions, you have to identify them. And then the muscles that do that job, meaning do that joint action. And we identified the main guy, main muscle who does hyperextension of the hip is the one that contracts. And there's a main guy who lengthens. It's glute max, exactly, Val. So glute max is the main guy that contracts on hyperextension of the hip. And the lever, meaning what's happening on one side of the joint is happening in response on the other side of the joint. That's the lever system. That's the way the whole body is designed, head to toe, every joint. And no muscle works in solo. We know that because we know, again, the way the body is designed. If we know muscle actions and their connection to the nervous system, we know that the nervous system never tells one muscle to move by itself. Not only do we know that as a statement of fact, but we even know it when we talk about the lever system. When the glute max contracts to create hyperextension of the hip, we know another muscle is in response to that because we know the lever system. So just out of the gate in lever system, we know, wait a minute, two muscles at least are doing the job, for sure. And muscles are wired in groups, which is efficient for the nervous system. So the group is the concert, Lori. I think that's the word that you're used to me saying. When muscles work together, they work in concert. And each part of the concert, each part of the orchestra, if you will, has a job. So when we said just a minute ago, the main muscle that does contraction, contraction with hyperextension of the hip is glute max. There's a group of muscles that helps him do that because no muscle works alone. And that group of muscles we identified as the hamstrings. In the concept of reciprocal inhibition, they're named as a group by their function called synergists. So the lever system is A main guy does the action, which is contraction, and a main guy responds to that and lengthens. In reciprocal inhibition, that main guy is called the agonist. The guy who responds to that contraction is the antagonist. The guys who help out are the synergists, the helper bees. Okay? So when you hear lever system or reciprocal inhibition or agonist or antagonist or synergist, I want you to know what that means, because it is part of how the body's designed, and it also helps you sort out a problem and who meaning muscle, who you're supposed to address and what about them needs to be addressed. I will say this probably till my last breath on earth, not everything that's tight needs to be stretched. In fact, 25% of all tightness needs to be stretched. If you are a stretcher, if you are a dig deep and release muscle tissues with your strong hands and your beady little thumbs, if you are a movement practitioner and you want to do long holds to quote stretch things, great. And you are only solving maximum 25% of the functional problems. Please, when you know reciprocal inhibition, it helps you know that, because most of what's happening in action, muscle action, is not stretching. So again, if we know how it's designed, it like, oh, that made it so simple. I just needed to remember how it's designed. Okay, so back to hyperextension of the hip, glute max is the main guy, hamstrings are helping, psoas is lengthening, and here's where I add my own colorful flair. I like to also think about the helper bees in the lengthening side of the lever system in reciprocal inhibition. There's no synergist to the antagonist, though. There's no helper bees of the lengthening muscle, but there is. Meaning there isn't by definition in reciprocal inhibition, but of course there is, because it's lengthening over here. So all the muscles that lengthen over here are lengthening. But in reciprocal inhibition, if you're using that as a formula, there's one agonist, meaning one contracting. There's one antagonist, one lengthening. And then there's synergist to the contracting. But then I started thinking, well, what about the synergist to the lengthening? There's other guys lengthening too. Of course there is. So just to make sure that I'm not confusing you, that's just my extra space, because I want to know who's doing the job, who's supposed to be doing the job, and who's not doing the job that I need to get them to do the job. And why? Why aren't they doing the job is also another piece to solving the puzzle. So we're going to talk about that today a little bit. We're going to start our conversation on the why when we talk about compensation. So we know that the hip joint is a 360 joint, meaning there's lots of joint action available here. I'm shaking my head no. There's lots of joint action available here because it's a 360 joint. We're focused on one joint action, only one, hyperextension of the hip. Think about this, loves. In hyperextension of the hip, just this joint action here, where is the knee facing in hyperextension of the hip?
No.
Diagonal down.
Diagonal down. Where is the hip? Sorry?
It's diagonal up. The hip is diagonal up. The knee is diagonal down.
Is the hip diagonal up?
Oh, the posterior side is.
Is it? Here's
Yeah.
extension. Here's hyperextension. What happened to the hips?
Like anterior? Yeah, I mean, did it-
Anterior. Yeah, that's a good.
anterior tilt?
Okay. Oh, I love what you guys are talking hip, like the actual hip. You're not talking pelvis. Oh, okay, smarty pants. So we talked about this months ago, maybe even last year. This right here is what people think of as their hip, hand on your hip. This is actually the hip.
Right.
Joint. Yeah. So you guys were talking to me about hip function because of where the body's designed, and I got super excited for a second and didn't expect it. Right. So the hip itself, meaning the top of the femur, is facing the same direction as the ASIS,
Okay.
but now facing the floor. and the knee
Yeah.
is the same, meaning they're not facing you now.
No.
Right. They're still in the same line as the ASIS, but now the thigh is moved back. So now this top of the femur is facing towards the floor, and so is the bottom of the femur at the knee facing the floor, unless you're Murph, and then all bets are off. Right. Okay. In hyperextension of the hip, where is the front of the ankle facing? Front of the ankle meaning bottom of the tibia. Where's the front of the ankle facing?
Down to the floor too.
Diagonal down.
Yeah. So
Well, I
we
mean,
know what Cheryl?
It's not actually diagonal, it's straight down. I mean, it's facing down,
Mhm.
right? I mean, diagonal would be external rotation. Then it would be diagonal, right? I mean, if
Well-
it's diagonal, I mean, that's what I think of. Diagonal would be off center.
So do we agree that I get it, right? Like we're describing something and we don't all, there's not an anatomical term for what we're describing. So notice that
Yeah.
our words can take us in different directions. So let's say this. Do we all agree that the top of the femur, the bottom of the femur, and the bottom of the tibia are all facing the same place?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. So they're all facing the same place, whether they're directly down towards the floor or diagonally down to the floor, or some, right? But we do agree that they're in a line. They're in the
Yeah.
same line as they are when he's standing. Hyperextension of the hip doesn't change that. Okay, beautiful. So where then does that mean that the toes are facing?
Same.
Same. Perfect.
Same.
Forward. Yeah. Straight line. Top of the femur, bottom of the femur, top of the tibia, bottom of the tibia, foot. Dun, 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 dun. Just like a standing leg. Beautiful. How many of you see people walking where their toes are actually out?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, but we
All the
just said
time.
that's not that joint action.
Mm-mm.
What the heck is happening? A
Mhm.
compensatory pattern is happening. That's what's happening. They're adding a joint action that's not part of what's needed. And as soon as you add a joint action, what does that mean for muscles? What is it?
Compensatory.
Well, no, don't go compensatory yet. Just
They're
by
creating a
design.
pattern. They're creating a pattern.
Yep, that is the result of it. But let's go back to the beginning, just make it super simple. When you add a joint action, what does that mean for muscles?
Different muscles are
Are
different
working.
muscles are doing it.
Right. And how many muscles do we know do the job?
Yeah, only one, which means that muscles are coming into play that aren't meant to be doing that action.
Right. So not only one muscle, because no muscle works alone, but every joint action has a different concert of muscles going on because every joint action has reciprocal inhibition. A concert of muscles that create that joint action. We started there, right? So now if we have our toes turned out, what joint action is that at the hips?
Rotation.
External.
rotation.
Yep, external or lateral rotation. Yep. Not the job of gluteus maximus, not the job of hamstrings, not the job of psoas and rectus femoris, but a job of another group of muscles. So
Mhm.
now at a baseline, before we even identify what muscles those are, at a baseline, we know that that action in that body is not efficient at best. It's not efficient. It's creating alternative ways of getting the job done that's not allowing the main guys to get stronger. So for those of you who are personal trainers and you're working with folks who aren't creating gains, if they're not using pure joint action, they're distributing and dispersing the strength available in those muscles. Somebody else is doing the job.
Mhm.
And when somebody else does the job that it's not designed to do, they fatigue quicker. At best. At worst, it's a compensatory pattern. So I want you guys to do it in that order before jumping to a compensatory pattern. And you can, I mean, I jumped to compensatory patterns because all of the rest of it's implied. But I want you to go through the steps first. Like, what is that joint action? What muscles do that joint action? Oh, is that where the symptoms are? In that other muscle? No wonder, because that muscle's been doing a job he's not supposed to do. No wonder he's mad and giving symptoms. And then it makes it super easy to solve the problem. So,
And I've got a question.
sure.
So just staying with that concept. So we know that lateral rotation is the piriformis and the go-go clean group doing it.
Right.
That is their job to do lateral rotation.
Yeah.
So we know it's not their job to take the leg back into hyperextension in a gait. But it is their job to do that. So why do they fatigue?
Such a gorgeous question. You know why I love this question, Anna? Because it tells me that you've been thinking through joint actions and function, and you walked yourself through it in your brain. And if you can do that and come up with a question that needs clarity, you can do that when you're with a client in their body. Why is that happening? This is supposed to be, that's this, that. I love this. I love the way you formed your question. And I asked myself the same thing, by the way. Here's how we know. Because in walking as a pattern, just like in walking up a flight of stairs, or even picking up my cup and drinking, we know that there's an efficient way to do all those things in the body. And by efficient, I don't mean lazy. I know that there's an efficient way to do that. And by efficient, we mean clean action. So when I lift my cup, for example, to drink, I know that that's mostly a movement in my elbow and in my forearm. It's not in my shoulder. That's not efficient. So why does that matter? It matters because if every time I lifted up a cup or a pen and I created elevation of the scapula, I know that not only is it not, that's not the cleanest action, but the implication of that is where the pain is. So if I overuse this muscle to do something that it's not needing to do, the key here is overused. So yeah, my body is designed for me to elevate my scapula, absolutely. But the muscles that do that are also connected to my neck. And now if I'm coming in with symptoms of neck discomfort or neck fatigue or pain even, those muscles aren't working the way they're designed to work, meaning in patterns. Not that they're not capable, I'm stumbling a little bit here, not that they're not capable of doing that joint action, they are, but it's not efficient use of them. Meaning they're jumping in when they don't need to is not efficient. Here, when it comes to walking, I'm gonna give you that same idea here, and it's a little more complex in walking because of the 360 joint in the hip. So if we know that standing is top of the femur, bottom of the femur, top of the tibia, bottom of the tibia, and the foot all facing forward, we know that this is neutral in this hip joint. This is neutral. The next joint action in walking that we identified is hyperextension of the hip. In order for me to follow through with that pattern of gait, I now have to go back to the opposite joint action, from hyperextension to flexion, from hyperextension to flexion. And that lever and all the muscles of reciprocal inhibition involved in that are responding to each other, hyperextension and flexion, hyperextension and flexion. But if I add in lateral rotation, now I have lateral rotation and hyperextension. I've got to correct lateral rotation and come back to flexion, and that's not that pattern, which means the body has to jump in quicker to do more work to correct the lateral rotation, to bring it back to no lateral rotation, to then bring it into flexion. It's more steps involved in going from hyperextension to flexion, which is the cleanest joint action in that pattern of movement. So it's not that the deep six aren't available and designed to do lateral rotation. It's that in that motion of movement, there's a lot of expenditure that's not necessary, that can create fatigue, and at any step break down, create a pattern, and now we have a compensatory pattern that doesn't get erased, because as soon as you step more than 3 times, now there's a pattern. The brain's very busy doing this thing that's supposed to be really easy and efficient and clean. Did that
Makes
answer it
sense.
for you, Anna? You got it, Cheryl? Does that answer it for
Yep.
you, Anna? Okay, great. And that's why in our mastery program, so again, I've shared with you guys that we're in different places of our training here. In our mastery program, we talk a lot about patterns. What's actually supposed to be happening when you walk? What's actually supposed to be happening when you walk up a flight of stairs? And how often do we distort what's actually supposed to be happening, meaning the efficient use of our body? And that's a skill, to be able to see what's off, right? To know what the pattern is and then to see what's off. And you all have it. You've all got it. Anytime you've watched somebody just walking, anytime you've watched somebody walking, you're like, wow, that guy does not look like he's comfortable. If that's all that you came up with, you were already spotting the inefficiency in that pattern. Even if you don't know the 12 steps of gait and exactly what happened, when you spot somebody looking uncomfortable, even though they haven't said anything to you, they're not your client, not looking like they're in pain physically on their face. If you as the practitioner spotted so much inefficiency that you can't imagine that they're comfortable, then that's the answer to your question too, in a somatic sense. You're looking at something going, that's not efficient. He's getting across the room, but that doesn't look good. And so what I want us to do is, well, what is it that's not efficient? Break it down. What's going on in that walking that's off? What's he doing mechanically that's not meant to be being done right now that you think is probably causing his discomfort? And so far, when we looked at hyperextension of the hip, we said that lateral rotation is not efficient. It's not there. So if it showed up in a static posture and then it carried through in walking, that's a whole lot of mileage and neuroplasticity on a pattern that's not meant to be there. And those are the folks that we then see in the mall and go, oh, wait, do we still go to malls anymore? You know what I mean? Well, we see them in a crowd and we're like, yeah, that guy looks like he's probably really uncomfortable, because there's a whole lot of extra stuff happening and movement that's just looks arduous. Go ahead, Anna.
So here's another question, only because I know with my left leg, I've had to, since working with the mastery program and learning all this juicy, incredibly great stuff, I've had to really work hard on my left hip joint and my left foot. But it still wants to go, it still wants to go to its old way. But what if there was something in the actual joint? Because we're not all made the same. So what if there was something in, the acetabulum? Because we know some people are super hypermobile and they can, do all kinds of splits and stuff like that. Like, what if there's actually something structurally in that, in that joint that impinges? And what if it's not muscular? What if there is something in the joint structure?
Okay. The chances of that are very small, and they're still there. And even if that's the case, our role as practitioners is to adamantly restore function then. Then you get to work harder to restore muscle contraction the way it's designed, especially if something's impeding it. So sometimes practitioners will jump to, well, there's just something up there, I can't do it. That's not true. You've given up too quickly. Don't do that. And the reasons that we know that is we have evidence that shows that folks with spondy in their spine, bone changes in their spine. There's a group of people who are riddled with symptoms, and there is a group of people with the same level of spondy that have zero symptoms. That's not a jackpot. That's not the lottery where some people won and some people didn't. When we restore the body back to its alignment and function, there is no pain. And often what happens when we first get onsets of these changes, which again is a very small population, by the way, but I get it that the question's real. When we first get the onset of those changes, we start compensating. If those changes are symptomatic, we compensate. And it's the compensation that's the problem. It's very infrequent. I mean, so I've been working clinically now for over 30 years. Started in an orthopedic setting with people with like legit orthopedic issues, right? And maybe 6 or 7 people in 30 years, I was like, God, I can't help them. And so I'm just giving you the, like, yes, it's real, but it's so little. There's always a way that you can positively affect change in a person, even when they have structural discrepancies. And so what I would look at in your body, Anna, is you're saying that your left toes want to still roll out. You still want to do lateral rotation of the hip, but we also know that you have symptoms asymmetrically in your hips that you've shared with us. Hello, like direct line connection, right? So let's say, for example, you did have arthritis in that hip. Does that mean that the muscles don't still work? Of course they do, or that they wouldn't be laterally rotating your hip. Of course the muscles are still there working. How are they working though? Are they working efficiently in the face of these changes? Or are they getting sloppy and lazy in the face of these changes? Because sloppy and lazy when it comes to muscle action is uncomfortable whether you have arthritic conditional changes or not. That's the point. Do you have to work harder when you have changes? Maybe. Do you have to focus more on strength building when you're hypermobile? Absolutely. Can you be pain-free in both of those instances? 100%. Can you also be riddled with pain that feels like it won't go away in both of those instances? Yes. And I've been on both ends of those spectrums. I've had pain that I thought, this is it. I'm gonna have to quit I have to quit what I do for a living. It's just not going away. And then I realized the one muscle that I wasn't contracting the way it was supposed to. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. I've been perpetuating this. Holy shit. I've been perpetuating this. And then back to pain-free. And I'm like, oh wait, I do know what I'm doing. Okay, good. Let me just remember this for myself, my clients, and my practitioners, right? Yeah. So great question. And too soon to jump there. Here's what I recommend for practitioners. What's the joint action that's supposed to be happening? What are the muscles that are supposed to do that job in contraction and lengthen? Do you see that there's something off? How do you get it back to the design of efficiency? Are there any structural changes? Have those structural changes impeded you? That's like step 7. I didn't keep track of how many I counted, but that was a lot. Whether those structural changes impede you from being able to create change is last on a whole list of other things that can keep you very productive and purposeful in the work that you do. I promise you. Okay. Any other questions? You guys are seeming very, was that like a lot of talking today? Are you thinking through client work? You're all very in your minds right now, troubleshooting something. What is it?
Now I'm going to put in a plug here because I wanted to at the beginning. So I have done tons of, I'm a yoga, there's that word, the next word, right? Yoga practitioner, instructor, teacher. And I've done tons of training. And I always knew something was fundamentally missing because yes, I know the asanas. Yes, I know how to cue. Yes, I know how to put together all kinds of levels of practices, but I didn't know what the hell was going on, that was creating those movements. And I know that that was a miss for me. And I could see people when I was attending yoga classes going, oh my God, they're going to hurt themselves. And even before I joined Mastery, I had already signed up for the muscle and movement course because I knew, I knew that was what was needed. And for me, I've got the binders, if you could see my plate, so here's latissimus dorsi, okay, out here. And I'm like doing okay, but it's such a huge muscle. How can I only do, really 2 functions, but really only 1 major one? Like, what the hell? Look at where it joins. Like for me now, having this information about how muscles move, where they originate, where they insert, what it is that they're supposed to do has opened up like this huge world of, oh, okay, now I get movement. And now I can, with intelligence, teach when I'm teaching, whereas before it was by rote. So that's my plug.
I love it, Anna. Well, good. So I'm glad that you're enjoying the course. That's beautiful. Also want to say, just before we wrap up for today, one of our anatomy advocates, Danielle Hess, is spearheading a study group. It's complimentary. She's doing it just because we get to review our muscles and talk shop with each other. So if you are thinking about the muscles and movement course, I recommend doing it now so that you can get in on that study group. Again, it's complimentary, it's included, but I don't know how many times she's going to run it because again, it's a pretty dense course. So I love that she's doing it and they're meeting regularly and getting a lot of value out of it. So, and I can tell because I go to Danielle's classes and it was a booty killer the other day. And I was like, holy smoke, girl. And she said, muscles and movement review course, man. I just remembered a few things I didn't remember last time. So it really, there's juice in it. And we do get to review as many times as we need to. So if you're interested in that course, the study group is happening now. It's the first time it's ever happened and they're getting a ton out of it. I want to make sure you all know about that. So that's where we're up to today. We talked just a little bit about compensatory patterns. I'm happy to talk more about them next week. If you guys feel like you'd like more talking on compensatory patterns, we can absolutely do that. I know obliques were also on the request list a few weeks back. And of course now client intakes. Oh, Lori, thank you. So the study group is there, great, in the chat. We also talked intakes today. So lots of information I want to share with you. This is like the fastest hour of my week, honestly. If I could just wrap you all up and take you to a private island and talk to you nonstop for 3 years, that I might feel satisfied after that. So literally I could talk to you guys about anything all day long. Awesome, Asia, I'm glad you're there. Yeah, let's get an island and let's go. But then all of our people that we get to serve would be waiting on the mainland for us. So there's also that. So anyway, if you have any specifics or requests that you want us to cover in a Tuesday training, leave them here in the chat, leave them in the comments under the video if you're watching the replay, or send me a direct email or reach out to one of our advocates and let us know so that I can definitely address exactly what you're wanting next, okay? And again, I can be here all day. Anna, do you have something else?
I do, because, you know, it seems for me anyway, that it's easier to address muscles that are around a joint, okay, because of all the things that you have reviewed. And I suspect that you're going to answer what I'm about to say with, well, that's a joint as well. But when there is the pain, you know, on the back of a rib, for example, or, you know, somewhere where it isn't an obvious joint, we know that vertebrae are joint, but, you know, when there's a stitch or a pain or whatever, that I find like I'm lost.
Yeah, no, that's a real one. And yes, eventually there's a joint, but on the back of the rib is a cage. So when things go awry in the rib cage or the thoracic area, there's a moment of pause, not oh shit pause, but just there's a moment of pause because you got to think through it slightly differently because a cage by definition is locked, right? So I get it that you would pause there. Just in the interest of time today, I recommend going through your muscles book, seeing what muscles are back there, considering breathing, because diaphragmatic breathing has to happen in order for the rib cage to be happy, and also that 90% of the pain in the body is referred. And let that help you narrow down what you're looking for if you're thinking of a particular client that you're working with.
Yeah, I just thought that might be a topic for, you know, somewhere down the line, you know, when pain isn't really right in a joint, like in a.
Oh, okay, I'll add that. I thought that was a question for today. We can absolutely cover that. Okay, good. Yeah, see, there's so much to cover together, my love, so much to cover. All right, so until I see you all next week, same time, same channel. Till I see you all, thank you so much for being here and investing in yourselves and in your clients. They may not know that you're here, but I do. And I really appreciate what you're contributing to our industry. Thank you for all the amazing work you're doing in the world.